I publicly destroyed my family's historic brand at their most important social event of the year. I did it because I discovered their entire fortune and heritage was built on recipes stolen from the Black woman who worked as their cook in the 1922nd. My name is Grace Holloway, and on the night my family tried to cement their perfect Southern legacy, I decided to serve the public the one dish they'd kept hidden for a century: the truth. On one side of Meeting Street in Charleston, the historic Hibernian Hall glowed, hosting my younger sister Caroline's debutante ball, a picture-perfect display of old money and tradition. On my side of the street, under strings of festival lights, was my stage. I wasn't in a ball gown. I was in my chef's coat. And I wasn't hosting a ball. I was throwing a massive, free food festival for the entire city. While my family toasted their heritage inside, I stood before a crowd of food bloggers, journalists, and hungry locals. I held up a small, leather-bound diary, its pages yellowed with age. "The Holloway family fortune," I announced, my voice carrying over the sizzle of shrimp and grits, was built on a lie. The famous family recipes they call their heritage were stolen from the brilliant Black cook who ran their kitchen 100 years ago. Her name was Eliza Pinckney. I pointed to the smiling, dignified elders standing beside me, her great-grandchildren. Tonight, we are not just serving food. We are serving justice. This is one of those family revenge stories that you can actually taste. And I promise you, the truth is delicious. My family tried to erase my story, so I decided to tell the one they'd spent a century trying to bury. If you've ever had someone try to take credit for your work or your truth, I want you to claim it now. Just type "my story" in the comments below. Let's show them our voices can't be silenced. But my public food festival wasn't just about correcting a historical wrong. It was also deeply personal. This particular war began 6 months ago, not with a shout, but with a quiet, condescending phone call from my mother, Beatrice. I was in the kitchen of my bustling Nashville restaurant after a successful Friday night service, still buzzing with creative energy. My mother's syrupy Charleston accent dripped through the phone as she described the lavish, over-the-top plans for my younger sister Caroline's debutante ball, the pinnacle of a young woman's entry into society. When I expressed my excitement to come home for it, there was a perfectly timed, chilling pause. "Well, darling, that's the thing," she said, her voice laced with that specific brand of Southern passive aggression that feels like a velvet glove hiding a fist. "Your father and I, and the ball committee, we all feel it might be better if you supported Caroline from afar this time. Your profession. It's just not quite in line with the tradition of the event, you understand." I understood perfectly. My career as a chef, my restaurant built on sweat and honest food, my life in a vibrant city like Nashville, it was an embarrassment. I didn't fit their pristine, manicured narrative of a proper Southern daughter. I was a problem to be managed, not a sister to be celebrated. My success, my passion, my entire life's work, reduced to a complication. I was the black sheep who didn't fit into their perfect family portrait. If you've ever been made to feel like the disappointment in your family just for choosing your own path, I want you to write, "I chose me" in the comments. You're in good company here. Being uninvited was a deep, painful cut, but it was a private one. I could have tried to move past it. But then the attacks turned public, and I realized my family's goal wasn't just exclusion, it was destruction. It started online. My Nashville restaurant, Grounded, which had spent years building a near-perfect 5-star rating, was suddenly flooded with a coordinated wave of 1-star reviews. They all appeared within a 48-hour period, using oddly similar phrases. Questionable food sourcing, lacked the authentic charm of true Southern cooking, felt unclean. It was a textbook digital smear campaign, an attempt to assassinate my reputation with 1,000 anonymous cuts. Then, the whispers started on food blogs and in the comment sections of Charleston society pages. Anonymous accounts began accusing me of stealing secret family recipes and passing them off as my own, a direct attack on my integrity as a chef. The language was venomous, and it had the sophisticated, passive-aggressive polish of my mother's social circle. This wasn't just random online hate, it was a calculated campaign. They weren't content to simply bar me from their world. They were actively trying to burn down mine as well. They were punishing me for my success, for my independence, for being everything they weren't. The message was clear. If I wouldn't conform to their image, they would try to erase me, both socially and professionally. They had drawn a new line in the sand, and I knew I had no choice but to cross it. The online smear campaign was an infuriating but impersonal attack. The real blow, the one that truly shattered me, came from the person I still held out a sliver of hope for, my sister, Caroline. Her silence was louder and more painful than 1,000 fake one-star reviews. I called her, again and again. Each time, it went straight to a full voicemail box. I left messages, my voice cracking with a desperation I hated. Caroline, it's me. Please, just talk to me. I know you're under pressure, but you know what they're saying isn't true. I sent texts, watching the little delivered notification under my please sit there for days, unanswered. After a week of this agonizing silence, I tried one last time. The phone didn't go to voicemail. It rang once, and for a heart-stopping second, I thought she'd finally answered. Instead, a cold, robotic voice announced, "The number you are calling is not accepting calls at this time." She hadn't just ignored me, she had actively blocked me. A quick check on social media confirmed it. Her profile was gone from my view. She had severed every digital tie, erasing our sisterhood with a few clicks. The same day, she posted a smiling photo with our mother at a charity luncheon, the caption gushing about the importance of family loyalty. That was the moment my heart truly broke. She wasn't a passive victim of our parents' scheme. She was a willing, active participant. There's a unique kind of grief that comes from being cut off by a sibling, the person who is supposed to share your history. If that part of the story resonates with you, just hit that like button. It's a quiet way of acknowledging that kind of pain without having to say a word. With Caroline's betrayal, the final door to my old life slammed shut. There was nothing left for me in Charleston, or so I thought. Before all this chaos erupted, I had promised a friend I would finally clear out my late grandmother Margaret's storage unit in Nashville. I went there seeking a quiet afternoon with old memories, a final goodbye to the one relative who had always championed my spirit. I had no idea I was about to say hello to a ghost. The storage unit was filled with the relics of a kinder past, old photographs, dusty furniture, and my grandmother's beloved wooden recipe box. I ran my fingers over the familiar, worn wood, remembering the comforting smell of her kitchen. As I lifted the last stack of her handwritten cards for pecan pie and buttermilk biscuits, I felt a slight give in the box's floor. A false bottom. My heart began to pound. I pried it open with an old key. Tucked beneath, wrapped in faded oilcloth, was a small, leather-bound diary. It was ancient, the leather cracked and the pages yellowed. The name on the inside cover, written in a ghostly, elegant script, was not my grandmother's. It was Eliza Pinckney, 1928. I knew that name instantly. Eliza was the legendary cook who had served my great-grandmother, the woman my family's official history credited as a beloved and loyal helper. Sitting on a dusty trunk under the single bare light bulb, I began to read. The pages were filled with more than just recipes for shrimp grits and she crab soup. They were filled with the quiet pain and fierce pride of a brilliant culinary artist watching her creations be praised, published, and eventually patented under her employer's name. This wasn't a diary. It was a witness statement from the past, an account of a theft that had built a dynasty. Holding that diary felt like holding a 100-year-old piece of dynamite. As I sat there for hours, the world outside the metal door of the storage unit disappearing, I read Eliza Pinckney's story. And with every page I turned, the entire foundation of my family, the very heritage they were so proud of, turned to dust. Her entries were filled with a passion for food that I recognized in my own soul. She wrote about the joy of perfecting the spice blend for her Charleston red rice, a dish my family still served at every holiday as great-grandmother's specialty. She detailed the moment of inspiration for her signature hummingbird cake, describing how she first served it at a garden party and watched my great-grandmother accept the thunderous praise as her own. Woven between these joyful culinary discoveries was a quiet, constant heartbreak. She wrote of seeing her recipes written down in my great-grandmother's handwriting to be shared with other society ladies, always without credit. The most painful entry described the day she saw the first prototype for the Holloway Heritage brand. Her food, her life's work, her soul, packaged for profit with a smiling, fictional story about generations of Holloway women in the kitchen. Her legacy had been stolen, and her identity completely erased. And in that dusty, silent storage unit, the final, sickening irony clicked into place. The rumor my family had spread that I, the inauthentic chef, had stolen their recipes was a twisted, cruel projection of their own original sin. Their entire dynasty, their social standing, their very name was built on the plunder of a brilliant woman they had silenced. My personal fight had just become a battle for historical justice. Eliza's diary was a testament, but a silent one. Her story needed living voices to give it power. My personal quest for revenge had now transformed into a quest for historical reparations. I drove back to Charleston, not as a rejected daughter, but as a woman with a mission. Using my investigative skills, I sifted through old city archives and church records. It didn't take long to find them. The Pinckney family. Eliza's direct descendants. They were still here, living with pride and dignity in the same city that had celebrated my family for the theft committed against theirs. I arranged a meeting with Eliza's great-granddaughter, Sarah Pinckney, a woman of 80 with eyes that held a century of wisdom and resilience. On the porch of her modest, proud home, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, I didn't make demands. I presented the diary as an offering, a piece of their history returned. And I apologized for the sins of my ancestors. Sarah listened, her expression calm. When I finished, she simply nodded. "We always knew," she said, her voice soft but strong. "Mama Eliza's story has been passed down through every generation. We just never had the proof." In that moment, a powerful alliance was forged. Not of anger, but of a shared desire to set the record straight. They weren't just helping me with my family feud. I was helping them reclaim a piece of their stolen legacy. And sitting on that porch, sharing sweet tea with the Pinckneys, I found a deeper sense of family than I'd ever felt in my own mansion. Sometimes, the family you find is more real than the one you were born into. If you have a chosen family that has stood by you when others wouldn't, just write "chosen" in the comments. Let's celebrate the families we build. With the Pinckney family as my allies, I finally had the moral high ground. But how could we deliver the truth with maximum impact? I could leak Eliza's diary to a national newspaper, a classic journalistic takedown. But that felt too impersonal, too cold. My family's original sin was rooted in the kitchen, in the theft of culinary creativity. The justice, I decided, had to be served on a plate. That evening, gathered around Sarah Pinckney's dining table, the air thick with the smell of sweet tea and determination, we mapped out our plan. It wouldn't be a protest. Protests are fueled by anger. This needed to be about joy, history, and restoration. "We won't crash their party," I said, the idea taking shape with an electrifying clarity. "We're going to throw a better one. A real one." We would host the first ever Eliza Pinckney Soul Food Festival. And we would do it on the exact same night as my sister Caroline's debutante ball, in the public park directly across the street from their exclusive, historic venue. We would cook Eliza's original recipes from the diary, her authentic shrimp and grits, her legendary hummingbird cake, her rich she crab soup. We would serve it all for free to anyone and everyone who came. We would have live local music. And we would have displays telling Eliza's story in her own words, showing enlarged copies of pages from her diary for all to see. Our event would be a vibrant, joyful celebration of authentic Charleston culture. Theirs would be a sterile, exclusive party celebrating a lie. It was the perfect recipe for revenge, a dish best served publicly, with a side of delicious, undeniable truth. An idea is one thing. Execution is everything. In the weeks leading up to the debutante ball, the Pinckney family home became our headquarters, a bustling command center fueled by sweet tea and a century's worth of righteous anger. I used every media contact I had, sending a cryptic but irresistible press release to every major food writer, blogger, and historian from Charleston to Atlanta. I promised an event that would rewrite a significant chapter of Southern culinary history, teasing the connection between the Holloway and Pinckney families. The mystery was too juicy for them to ignore. Meanwhile, the Pinckney family mobilized. Aunts and uncles who had grown up with these recipes perfected them. cooking from Eliza's diary and their own memories. Cousins secured city permits and organized volunteers from their church. It was a true community effort, a stark contrast to the cold, corporate planning of the ball across the street. My own family, wrapped in their impenetrable bubble of elitism, was completely oblivious. We later learned they had heard whispers of a little soul food festival happening in the park but dismissed it as some quaint local affair, far too common to be of any concern to them. Their arrogance was our greatest asset. The day before the event, as we packed trucks with cooking equipment and boxes of fresh, local ingredients, I felt a strange calm settle over me. We weren't just preparing food, we were preparing to serve a reckoning. There's a unique energy that comes when you know you are about to speak a truth that has been silenced for far too long. It's a mix of nerves and absolute certainty. If you've ever felt that feeling right before a big, necessary confrontation, just type "Reedy" in the comments. I want to feel that collective strength with you. The evening of my sister's debutante ball arrived on a humid Charleston breeze, thick with the scent of gardenias and impending justice. As the first black cars and limousines began to pull up to the stately Hibernian Hall, our own Festival of Truth roared to life. From their side of the street, you could hear the polite, muted sounds of a classical string quartet. From our side, a joyful brass band was playing, a sound that was pure Louisiana, transplanted for one night in the heart of South Carolina. While their guests in stiff tuxedos and pastel ball gowns filed into a silent, gilded hall, a crowd of hundreds of people of every color and class were gathered in the park, laughing, dancing, and drawn in by the irresistible smell of real food being cooked with soul. The trap was working perfectly. The guests arriving for the ball had to walk right past us. I watched their faces as their drivers let them out. First confusion, then curiosity, then outright envy as they saw the vibrant, joyful scene just a few yards away. The real victory began when I saw a handful of the city's most influential food critics and journalists, dressed to the nines for the exclusive ball, hesitate at the hall's marble entrance. They exchanged a few words, then, as a group, they crossed the street towards us. I watched as they took their first bites of Eliza Pinckney's shrimp and grits. Their professional, stoic faces broke into expressions of genuine delight. They started taking notes, snapping photos for their blogs. The audience my family had spent a fortune to impress was now being captivated by the very authenticity they had rejected. Their perfect evening was already beginning to crumble, and I hadn't even said a word yet. With the city's most important culinary voices now in my audience, their phones live streaming to thousands, I knew it was time. I signaled for the brass band to quiet down and stepped to the microphone. The moment of reckoning had arrived. I welcomed everyone to the first annual Eliza Pinckney Soul Food Festival. I introduced Sarah Pinckney and her family, the true heirs to Charleston's culinary royalty, who stood proudly beside me. Then I held up the old, leather-bound diary for the cameras to see. Across the street, I began, my voice carrying in the quiet night, my family is celebrating a legacy, the Holloway heritage. I am here tonight to tell you, and to show you, that this heritage was stolen. As I spoke, the screens behind me came to life. They showed pages from Eliza's diary, her elegant handwriting detailing the birth of a recipe. Next to it, a page from my great-grandmother's best-selling cookbook, with the same recipe, almost word for word, but with a different name at the bottom. I told the story of Eliza's genius, her passion, and her quiet erasure from history. I connected that century-old theft to my own story, how the family that built its name on a lie tried to destroy my career by accusing me of the very same crime. This festival is not an act of revenge, I concluded, as the crowd of hundreds stood in stunned, rapt silence, a silence that felt more powerful than any applause. It is an act of restoration. This is the real food. This is the real history. Across the street, I could see the pale, horrified faces of my parents and my sister pressed against the grand ballroom windows, watching their perfectly curated world burn to the ground, not with fire, but with the undeniable, delicious truth. The Festival of Truth sent a shockwave through Charleston. The story was on the front page of every paper. Faced with Eliza's diary and overwhelming public outrage, the Holloway Heritage brand collapsed under the weight of its own century-old lie. My family was forced into a public settlement with the Pinckneys, involving financial reparations and, most importantly, legally transferring the copyrights of Eliza's recipes back to her descendants. But we didn't want just their money. We wanted to build something new. 6 months ago, we opened Eliza's Table in the heart of Charleston, a restaurant co-owned by a Holloway and the Pinckneys, dedicated to telling the true stories of Southern food. We also established a culinary scholarship in her name for young Black chefs. My sister, Caroline, eventually left our parents' world. She now works with us, not as a society princess, but as an apprentice, quietly learning the authentic heritage she was once taught to ignore. This whole journey, this messy, delicious family revenge story, taught me the most important lesson of my career. Authenticity is the one ingredient you can't fake. A legacy built on a stolen recipe will always leave a bitter aftertaste. A true legacy isn't about the name you inherit, but about the truth you choose to serve. It's about honoring your sources, sharing the credit, and creating something that nourishes more than just your own ambition. Thank you for listening to my story. If you believe a real legacy is built with honesty and shared with generosity, then I invite you to subscribe. Join a community committed to celebrating the real ingredients of a life well lived, one true story at a time.